Hello everyone, it's time for another deck profile. After for so long of not doing this deck profile and with set 2 support along with Festival Collection, it's time to do the Razael deck or the combination of Razael and Liael Morta, because Liael Morta wasn't really good for this deck from set 2, but with Festival Collection, it made it really good. And technically the two cards go together because they're kind of lovers in the lore. So it actually kind of makes sense. And in fact, Liael actually was originally more Gear Chronicle than more Angel Feather-like, but when it became more Angel Feather-like, obviously it became Cater Sanctuary just to go back to the past to protect Razael. So we got this little cool concept here with Festival Collection support where that one little support actually makes Liael actually good for the deck. Even though originally Liael was meant to counter Blandgmire to go up against Razael. But anyway, what I think about the deck? Design-wise, it's very similar to Makulth Melekh in a way, other than the part where you have to hurt yourself. Because it's revives stuff from the drop zone, which is basically healing in a way, and also can make a miracle where you can basically survive in a 6 damage trigger. It doesn't even have to be a heal trigger. It's a one-time use 6 damage trigger, where it becomes a heal. But other than that, I just like the cool design and basically the playstyle of it, where you basically get easy multi-attack from the drop zone. Also, the fact that you can combine Liael with it is also pretty cool as well. And if needed, you can also use Liael as another option for you to win the game. But on that, there's really not much to say about it. And let's just begin with the deck profile. Of course, we started with the ride deck. Here's the starter, in which we go to the grade 1. The Testa, where when you ride the grade 2 on top of it, you can call this a rear guard and soul charge 1. That soul will be very important because, yes, this deck will use quite a bit of soul and maybe a bit of counterblast. But the second skill is that during your turn, if you have Razael Vanguard plus 2k, doesn't really matter here. It's just here for the ride line purpose. In which we go to the grade 2, where when you ride the Razael on top of it, choose a grade 2 or less card from your drop zone and call it. This will also trigger some superior call ability, so it's also pretty nice. And it's also nice that you could just discard your key piece just to call it back, which you will have some of those abilities. In which we go to Razael himself. So the skill is that when this card attacks, you can counterblast 1 to call 2 cards from your drop zone with different grades and totaling the grades from your damage zone. So the more damage you have, the higher grades you can call. So if you have 4 damage, you can call a grade 2 and a grade 1 because it has to be different grades. But you have 3 damage, you can obviously call 2 and 1. 0 is by default, you can always call, which is something that is really nice. So you can always get a guaranteed plus 2 here. And if you have something like 5 damage, it could be 3 and 2. So this part kind of reminds me a bit of Makulth Melekh, except that there's multi-attack on top of it. Being angel theme and also just reviving your stuff. But the second skill is the Divine skill, where you can act Vanguard Soul Blast 1, return all your critical triggers from your drop zone to your deck. And of course shuffle it, you get drive plus 1 plus this skill. If you perform a damage check and it's the 5th or 6th damage and it's not a heal trigger, heal 1 point. Hence the plot armor skill. Overall, I just kind of like it, mainly for the multi-attack part, but it's nice that you can recycle your triggers as well. It's just basically for you to make your miracle. But overall, it's pretty cool. Reminds me of Makulth Melekh, which is why I actually built the deck. And then, of course, now to the main deck. We must run 3 more copies of it because Persona Ride. In which we go to Liael Morta. Keep in mind, if you use Razael's Divine Skill, you can't use this one because the Divine Skill can only be used once per game. You can't mix or match. But anyway, the skill is, when this card attacks, you can counterblast 1, choose one of your rear guards, and bind it, and insert your deck for 1 card with the same grade, and call it to rear guard, and of course shuffle your deck. You're not going to use this skill at all, unless if you actually need to ride this card, which will be a maybe sometimes. But the second skill is the main part, where when placed on Guardian, yes, Guardian, discard a card from your hand and put 2 cards from your bind zone to the bottom of your deck, hence some good recycling here, and then choose one of your Fated 1 units, and it cannot be hit until the end of battle. Basically, it's a PG that can counter guard restricts, and I love that. Just overall, pretty cool defensive cards, and for lore reasons, I just like it. Obviously, you're not going to be able to get any bind cards, but thanks to Festival Collection, this has changed that. Originally, it wasn't even meant for that, but because of Festival Collection, it kind of just made the deck work out really well with this card. But anyway, the Divine skill is that at the end of this card attack, if your opponent's Vanguard is at least grade 3, you can ride a copy of herself from the drop zone as stand and drive -1. So it's nice that you can superior ride and then reuse the first skill again, because that's not hard once a turn. So you can actually get even more attacks out of it. Overall, it's just pretty cool, but you mainly use it for the defensive skill unless if you need to actually ride it. And then finally for the last grade 3, the Blue Skies Night Dragon, the promo. So when you play a normal order, all your front row units plus 5k and all your back row units get the boost ability. This skill might not even come up at all actually. But the second skill is that when this card attacks, you can count on look at top card of your deck to choose up to one grade 3 or less card from among them and call it to rear guard. And if it's a unit, call it to rear guard if it's a unit card. If it's not, the order card goes to your hand and then shuffle your deck, of course. And since it is that order card, you choose a column and stand it. This is just overall pretty good for even more attacks. And I like the fact that you can even search for your order and basically call from deck in mid battle on top of it. I might run more copies of this, but because it's grade 3, it is a little bit of a hindrance at some cases, because Razael needs your damage count to even make proper grade calls. So if you're at low damage, this card is not as great. So I don't entirely know should I run more copies of this, but I am thinking about it just because of mid-battle superior call, which could give you even more attacks. So that's it for the grade 3 lineup. To the grade 2 lineup, first up we got Nobia. So on place, on rear guard, if your Vanguard is Razael, you can count on look at top 5 cards of the deck to choose one card from among them to call, and then put the rest at the bottom of the deck in any order. But if you call in battle, you put the revealed card to your hand instead. Hence why I might cut a few copies of these out just for the grade 3, because that one can call mid-battle rather than this. But regardless, this card is still pretty good, because the second skill is that when this card attacks at least a grade 3 unit, and your Vanguard is Razael, you can Soul Blast 1 plus 10k, which is of course very helpful. And once again, a little bit Soul Blast heavy here, but that extra 10k is powerful, especially since there are ways to regenerate your soul now, and that one card that you could regenerate your soul with, you do want to Soul Blast it, so it's not entirely too bad. Which is the next card, Nibiris. So when placed by your grade 3 or greater Vanguard's card ability plus 10k, aka Razael, and it could even be in a way Liael Morta. But the second skill is that at the end of this card attack, if you have at least a grade 3 Razael, you can Energy Blast 3, put this as soul, draw a card, and look at top card of your deck and put it on the top and bottom. This does few things. So not only it refunds your soul and lets you draw, but you can also peek at the top card of your deck, which could even be a trigger, which could be your miracle trigger for your heal. This card is just really good overall for the deck, and it actually made the deck really strong because of it. And the part that you're just using energy instead of counterblast is also very nice and helps you refund the soul. This is the only card that uses energy in this deck. So no reason not to run 4 of these. And then finally, to make that Liael Morta engine actually work, so first off, I run the 2 Finisher along with the 4 Order card. So Finisher is actually the card that searches up the order, hence there's this. And if Finisher is chosen by this ability, shield plus 5k. This is the order card that lets you choose one of your units that has not been attacked and put it to Guardian and bind it at the end of the battle. Hence, it's going to fuel Liael Morta to basically recycle. And it could even be your triggers, which is kind of guaranteed with Razael in many ways, especially in the early game, where you can guarantee to call your grade 0s and you can just recycle them back in the deck. It's just overall a cool little engine, and it just makes Liael Morta really work with this deck. I'm just wondering if they're really going to hit Liael Morta with this card one day, because yeah, Liael Morta with this is just insane. So that's it for the grade 2 lineup. For the grade 1 lineup, here's Aerial Sage. This is the 15k booster for Razael, and if it's behind the Vanguard, you can discard a card from hand to countercharge 1. So it just helps out if you need the counterblast, and the discard isn't bad either because you're going to call from drop zone anyway. But do keep in mind about your counterblast. So this card kind of became a little more important for you to put behind Razael, so I have it as 3 of. And then we got Korrigan. This is kind of a staple for every cater deck, because when this card boosts, if you have more rear guards than your opponent, or you play an order this turn, you can give it plus 5k. And at the end of it, retire the unit. So you can look at top 2 cards of your deck to choose one from among them and put it to your hand, and then the other to bottom. If you cannot afford this, go ahead and run Painkiller, because they kind of do the same thing. But regardless, it's just really cool that this card can go from drop zone, so then you can just resurge it back to the field and then just do this skill again. That's what makes this card really good for the deck. It might get hit one day too, so just keep that in mind, but you have Painkiller as an alternate option if you want something cheaper. Even though Painkiller does cost a Soul Blast, it's still not too bad to run. And finally, the 4 PGs, because you just have to run it, and one of them is the Elemental Sanctitude, the new one. And for trigger lineup, of course the OT, 8 crits because you want to maximize Razael's skill as much as possible. 3 draws, because it's just helpful. I might actually replace it with fronts considering the amount of superior calls you get, but you also need the key pieces, so maybe draws are better. And finally 4 heals, 2 being counter heals. So that's it for this deck profile on my Liael Morta. Razael Liael Morta deck. What do you guys think of it? What other cards would you recommend and what other changes would you make? Honestly, I've been liking the deck so far, and ever since this order engine came out, it just made this deck so much better with Liael Morta because now you can actually run the two lovers together, especially for lore reasons. Even though Liael Morta was originally just meant to counter Blandgmire as a tech card, with the order card, you could actually just straight up run Liael Morta in the deck. Especially if you play Liael Morta as her own deck, you can actually just run the order card with it just to make it even better. But other than that, there's really not much to say about it. At most, I might just replace the Divine Sister, because as long as you got the order card, you're technically good, but I had the Divine Sister just for some extra consistency. But other than that, there's really not much to say about it. Just all the cool new support to make Razael even better than it is. But I still hope for Evolve form for Razael, especially soon. Especially since we got the Destined one of time, Liael of Boreum, the opposite of Liael Morta. I'm just curious how things are going to go, especially for Liael Morta herself. Because I do hope that Liael Morta still gets support. But other than that, there's really not much to say. And see you all next time.